Inside San Quentin State Prison, California's most notorious prison exposed, sound of metal doors slamming, a distant echo of footsteps. A voice speaks over a low, tense hum. Narrator. Calm, chilling. On the edge of San Francisco Bay sits a fortress older than California's statehood, a place where death, redemption, and violence all share the same walls. This is San Quentin State Prison, America's oldest, most infamous penitentiary. From death row to rehabilitation programs, from riots to reform, what really happens inside these walls defies belief. Welcome to the real San Quentin. Title card fades in. Inside San Quentin State Prison. Chapter 1. The Gates of San Quentin, where history and violence collide. Narrator. Before you even step inside, San Quentin feels alive. Not in a comforting way, but in a way that every sound, every shadow, carries a weight. Built in 1852 before the Civil War, San Quentin is older than the state's constitution itself. Its foundations were laid by prisoners, men in chains, forced to build the very walls that would confine them for the rest of their lives. Visual, early black and white sketches of San Quentin, then fade to modern aerial footage of the prison by the bay. At first glance, San Quentin looks like a relic, beige concrete walls rising over the blue shimmer of the Pacific. But inside, the air hums with tension. Every inmate here knows what San Quentin represents. It's not just a prison. It's a symbol. The name itself has become shorthand for danger, death, and confinement. For over 170 years, San Quentin has housed some of the most dangerous criminals in American history. Serial killers, gang leaders, and death row inmates whose crimes shocked the nation. But the truth of San Quentin is more complicated. It's not just a story of brutality. It's also one of survival, transformation, and the human spirit. Inside impossible conditions. Narrator. Voice drops lower. When you pass through the front gate, you feel it immediately. The silence. The massive steel doors shut behind you with a hiss, and the world outside disappears. What's left is concrete, surveillance, and 4,000 men fighting to stay alive. In every possible sense of the word. The first thing you see is the lower yard, one of the most dangerous open spaces in American prison history. It's deceptively peaceful, blue sky above, the smell of salt water nearby. But to those who live here, it's a minefield. Every gang has its area. Every inmate knows the unspoken rules. Former inmate interview. Archival voice. You don't look too long at anyone. You don't stand too close to the wrong bench. You move like you've been there forever, even if you just got off the bus. Visual. Montage of security footage. Inmate yard movements. Guards on towers. The yard is divided by invisible lines of race and gang loyalty. The Aryan Brotherhood on one side, the Crips and Bloods on another, Mexican Mafia and Norteños each staking their ground. These lines aren't drawn in chalk, they're drawn in blood. A history built on violence. San Quentin has seen it all, from riots to executions. In 1930, the prison's first lethal gas chamber was built, a green, airtight steel room that would later execute more than 190 people, including serial killers like Carol Chessman and Clarence Ray Allen. Each death drew national headlines, turning San Quentin's name into a grim legend. Visual, archival footage of the gas chamber, newspaper headlines fade across the screen. But behind the headlines was something darker, a system that mixed brutality with bureaucracy, punishment with spectacle. Executions weren't just justice, they were theater. Journalists watched, lawmakers debated. Outside the prison, people protested, while in situ, ID inmates listened to the faint hiss of cyanide gas, knowing it could one day be them. Narrator. San Quentin's death row became infamous, a place where time slowed to nothing. Some men waited 20 years for execution. Others died of natural causes before their appeals ended. But even death row inmates said the worst part wasn't dying. It was waiting to die. Visual. Close-up of cell door clanging shut. Light flickers through narrow window slits. The psychology of survival. San Quentin isn't just a physical prison, it's psychological. Inside, inmates describe it as living in a pressure cooker. Every decision matters. Who you talk to, who you ignore, what you look at. One wrong move can mean death. Guards watch every corner, yet violence still erupts. Not because of lack of control, but because of what control does to people. The longer a man stays inside, the more the walls close in. Former Warden Jean Woodford. San Quentin is a place that changes you. For the officers, for the staff, for the inmates. No one walks out of those gates the same. Visual. Interview footage cuts to guards in towers overlooking the yard. The truth is, San Quentin has always been a paradox, a place of horror and humanity. It's the same prison that executed murderers, and yet also the same place that runs some of the country's most successful rehabilitation programs. From the Prison University Project to the Last Mile, inmates have earned degrees, learned coding, and rebuilt their lives, all within walls designed to crush the human spirit. It's a contradiction, a prison that kills, but also teaches men to live again. Narrator, rising intensity. But for many, redemption is only a word. Because beneath those programs and promises, San Quentin's darker legacy still bleeds through the cracks. And its history of riots, executions, and survival is about to reveal just how close the prison came to total collapse. Music rises. The sound of alarms echo. The blood and rebellion. The riot that shook San Quentin. Sound of a distant siren. The screen fades from car motion waves to the echoing clang of a prison gate slamming shut. Narrator. Low, deliberate tone. On August the 21st, 1971, the quiet tension inside San Quentin finally erupted. What started as an ordinary summer morning would become one of the bloodiest days in California's prison history. It began in the Adjustment Center, San Quentin's most secure unit, the section reserved for the most dangerous, volatile men in the state. But that day, someone managed the impossible. George Jackson, a man whose name would forever change the story of San Quentin. The man who defied the system, George Jackson, wasn't an ordinary inmate. He'd been convicted in 1960 for robbing a gas station, a $70 crime that earned him an indeterminate sentence of 1 year to life. But over time, Jackson transformed. He became a revolutionary, a symbol of resistance inside America's prison system. He wrote letters that became bestsellers, including Soledad Brother, where he exposed the brutality, racism, and hopelessness of life inside. To the public, Jackson became a voice for the voiceless. To the state, he became a threat, visual. Archival photographs of George Jackson overlay newspaper clippings titled Prisoner Revolution and Voice of the Incarcerated. By 1971, Jackson was back at San Quentin, locked inside the most secure wing. But on that August day, the balance of power shifted. The day San Quentin erupted. At 3:00 p.m., routine cell checks began. But when guards opened Jackson's cell, chaos followed. Somehow he'd obtained a smuggled pistol, a 9mm Astra, small enough to hide in a wig his attorney allegedly brought in. Seconds later, gunfire tore through the narrow hallway. Jackson and a group of inmates overpowered several guards and seized hostages. Their target wasn't escape. It was justice. In their eyes, they were striking back at a system built on oppression. Sound design. Gunshots echo through corridors, shouting, alarms blaring. A bell rings repeatedly. Within minutes, the prison descended into a war zone. 3 guards, Jerry Graham, Frank de Leon, and Paul Krasnis, and 2 white inmates were killed in the ensuing violence. Jackson and the rebels tried to make it out through the yard, but snipers on the towers opened fire. As he sprinted toward the outer wall, George Jackson was shot and killed instantly, a single bullet through the head. The riot ended as fast as it began, but the aftermath would haunt San Quentin forever. The aftermath, the Soledad brothers and a divided America. When news broke that Jackson was dead, the outside world erupted. To some, he was a murderer. To others, he was a martyr, a man executed by a system that never gave him a chance. Inmates across California began to organize, fueled by Jackson's words and death. Within days, Folsom, Soledad, and Chino prisons went on lockdown as authorities feared a wave of coordinated uprisings. Visual, archival news clips of protests outside San Quentin, Free the Soledad brothers, banners waving, black and white footage of National Guard vehicles. The state cracked down hard. San Quentin became even more militarized, thicker walls, heavier gates, and stricter isolation policies. Jackson's rebellion, in a tragic twist, led to a new era of super-maximum control, the blueprint that would later inspire prisons like Pelican Bay and ADX Florence. Narrator, somber. The uprising didn't end with freedom. It ended with silence, the kind that still echoes through San Quentin's corridors 50 years late. For the price of change, out of the ashes of the 1971 riot came reform. Slow, reluctant, but real. Programs were re-examined, oversight committees were created, and San Quentin, once defined only by violence, began to experiment with something radical for its time: rehabilitation. Today, San Quentin runs some of the most progressive programs in America's prison system. The San Quentin News, a newspaper written and edited entirely by inmates. The Prison University Project, where prisoners earn college degrees. And Ear Hustle, a podcast produced inside the prison that tells the real human stories of incarceration. Visual, montage of modern inmates recording a podcast. Classrooms inside prison walls. Men working in the print shop. These efforts don't erase the past, but they show that even in a place built on violence, change is possible. Not from the system itself, but from the people living inside it. The echoes of San Quentin. Camera pans across the San Francisco Bay. The prison stands against the sunset, golden light reflecting off the razor wire. Narrator, reflective. San Quentin isn't just a prison, it's a mirror of America's soul. It holds our darkest truths and our deepest hopes. From the days of public hangings to rehabilitation and redemption, San Quentin remains proof that behind every locked door is a story still waiting to be told. Sound fades. The clang of a closing gate. Title reappears. Inside San Quentin, California's most notorious prison exposed. Narrator, closing line. Because inside these walls, history never dies.